Greetings, Earthlings! I'm Malakai. Welcome to the Genesis Club. In this video, I'm going to be talking about design and similarities. This script was originally written as an essay for my friend from college. I've had to rewrite the end, however, because the computer managed to delete it. As I'm sure you'll be aware, a common argument for evolution would be the similarities in the morphology or DNA of animals that they profess evolved from each other. For example, we share an amount ranging from 95 to 98% of our DNA with chimps. This amount changes depending on the evolutionist you ask, which is suspicious in itself. There are those who also argue that because we also look similar to them, we must have evolved from them. In this video, I will focus on why the argument is fallacious and is just as much evidence for a common designer as it is for common descent. As a side note, I will also be making a video on why this is just not true. We don't share that much DNA with them. But for now, I'll begin by explaining why designers choose their design. It is not a fact for dispute. Human beings are very intelligent and good at designing things. Our own intelligence transcends that of any known animal, even those whose brains are larger. Because of this intelligence, we have been able to design great structures and technology since our creation. We have invented cars, buildings, planes, tools, computers, and have even learned how to create a media source on which you are watching this video. Let's use cars and related videos as our example. Cars, vans, and lorries are very similar in morphology. Each have round wheels, usually with rubber tyres. Vans and cars usually have 4, while lorries may have 4 to 6, plus however many of them are on the trailer. Each have at least one door through which a passenger can enter, and have a steering wheel, usually a round wheel, which turns the front and back wheels right or left. Each have a few pedals, which, if pressed, perform a different function, such as the accelerator pedal, which moves the vehicle forward, and the brake pedal, which attempts to stop or slow the vehicle. Each also has an interior which can be used for transporting non-human items, such as the boot of a car or the 2 doors on the back of a van. The reason these vehicles have such similar design is not because they are all related by billions of years of evolution from a tin can, but because they all have similar purpose. Any designer knows that round wheels, for example, are better for transport than square wheels. In this instance, because the wheels have a similar purpose, they have a similar design. It is the same for each of the other features. It should also be noted that the other designs could be used that would have worked just as well. For example, holding a button down on the steering wheel or using a lever could just as easily be used as a method of acceleration. The steering device does not necessarily have to be a wheel. It can just as easily be another lever, or a handlebar, or a stick, or half a wheel, or something else. Yet they are all similar, despite the fact most of them have different designers. Is it therefore unreasonable to assume that the same designer would use similar features for similar purposes? For example, our pelvis is perfectly suited to our bipedal stance. So because we are bipedal, as it was likely Australopithecus afarensis was, our pelvis is similar to theirs, and theirs to ours. It should be noted as well that Australopithecus afarensis pelvis is very similar to a gorilla. So what about DNA similarities? Well, the same applies really. Geneticist Dr. James Allen found himself converted from evolution by a question asked by his wife. Quote, "Is there any reason why God should not have created all forms of life on the basis of a universal genetic code? And indeed, is there? Designers in the modern day do exactly the same thing. Plus, if God used different DNA for everything, how on earth could we digest our food?" A good example of a similarity in DNA evolutionists really like to cite is chromosome 2. For those of you who don't know, chromosome 2 is the argument that humans used to have 24 chromosomes, just like apes, but 2 of those chromosomes fused, and now we only have 23. Now, I'm not going to comment on whether or not this fusion happened or didn't happen, as frankly it doesn't matter either way if 2 human chromosomes fused into 1. But consider this, a guy called Ralph in Australia Consider this quote from a guy called Ralph in Australia. He says, "Although I have a degree in biology, it is my experience in computer programming that makes me skeptical that there is really a good case." I don't know why he's put it in quote marks, but he said good case here. "Computer programs I did were modular. If I finished one program and then had to do another which had differences in purposes but used many similar modules, I'd simply transfer many of the modules from that old program to the new. However, I might need to adjust them somewhat to fit the new overall purpose exactly. One type of adjustment I could possibly do is combine two modules from the old program into a new larger module, add some new information, and delete some now irrelevant information, which is essentially what happened with Chromosome 2. I have no trouble believing that God could use a similar process when he designed the software for apes and humans. To claim that there must have been a fusion is as silly as claiming that there must have been a fusion of V and U, since W looks like two letters fused together." Now, I do actually believe that last bit is fallacious, but we'll leave it in there anyway. I don't need to comment on it for now. Now, I have always said, since my conversion to Christianity, that belief in evolution requires at least some denial of design and information technologies. God, as not only an excellent designer, but also the designer of design itself, would have every motive to design things in the same way human designers do. And in Romans 9:20-21, he tells us that that's exactly what he does. He compares himself to a potter by saying, quote, "But who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, 'Why did you make me like this?' Does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay or some pottery for special use, and some for common use?" Unquote. So, given what we know about God, especially from that verse, why is evolution the only acceptable explanation for similar DNA and morphology in similar animals? Think about it for a moment. DNA is what determines certain traits of an organism. A certain DNA code gives certain traits. God gives organisms different traits according to their purpose. Why is it illogical for God to use similar DNA for similar features which he uses for similar purposes? Of course our DNA is similar to chimps. They're similar to us, and that design suits them rather well, just as our design suits us rather well. If you're an evolutionist, I'd like to know just one piece of empirical evidence you can give that shows, beyond all reasonable doubt, the similarities between DNA and morphology are the result of evolution and not intelligent design. I've been using this argument for a while now, and I've heard some attempted answers. The first is that machines and computer programs do not reproduce. I've two ways to answer this, both of which are compatible with each other, so it's not an either-or response. The first answer is that it makes the argument for evolution so much worse. Reproduction is an incredibly complex thing in every organism. How do you get a reproductive system to form without an intelligent designer and maker? Secondly, if a machine could be created to reproduce, though all attempts at this have failed, would you then be justified in saying that the resulting offspring were without designer and maker? Well, of course not. Even if the offspring looked slightly less like its parent, you would be entirely unjustified in saying it was without a designer and maker, and as a result of a £2 coin which created itself millions of years ago. In fact, the Bible tells us that God designed animals to reproduce, so reproduction is a design feature of all the animals, making them exactly like the machine that I just described. So again, my challenge to evolutionists is this. Knowing what we know about God from the Bible, and knowing what we know about design and biology, what gives evolution the edge over biblical creation and intelligent design? Thank you for watching. God bless.